Hi there folks. In this video we're going to have a look at a Prvi Partizan or PPU brand load for the 303 British. This is the 174 grain full metal jacket boat tail load from Prvi. And this load is a pretty good substitute for the pretty much unavailable surplus ammunition of yesteryear. Anybody who has a 303 rifle knows that surplus ammunition in this caliber is pretty much a thing of the past. It's pretty much all been shot up. So if you would like to shoot a kind of an equivalent loading to the original type of service ammunition, this is a reasonably good substitute for that surplus ammunition. So as I said, it's a 174 grain load with a boat tail bullet. Now the original load for the bulk of the loadings for the 303 British for rifle use was the Mark 7 Spitzer bullet with a flat base, and Mark 8 boat tail bullet ammunition was designed and intended for machine gun use. So this ammunition sort of combines a little bit of both of those loads, and basically it has the velocity of a Mark 7, which is about 2460 feet per second or 750 meters per second according to the Prvi website, and that's about the equivalent speed of Mark 7 ball, but it has the boat tail bullet that was in the Mark 8. So basically you've got the pressure equivalent to Mark 7, so this should be safe to shoot in any serviceable 303 British rifle, and you get the increased downrange performance delivered by the boat tail bullet. So we'll pull a round out of the box here and let us have a little closer look at it. And this is, like I said, this is current production stuff, and it is quite clean and shiny, nicely annealed, very good looking ammunition, and it has the PPU head stamp and 303 British to indicate the caliber. Earlier production Prvi ammunition, you will find it marked with the Cyrillic equivalent of PPU, so it looks a little bit different than this stuff, but basically the load, to the best of my knowledge, is pretty much the same. The contents of the cartridge are pretty much the same as this current production stuff. So let's have a look at what's actually inside one of these cartridges. I pulled a bunch of them apart and examined some of the contents and weighed some of the projectiles and the powder and so forth. And as I mentioned, this is a 174 grain full metal jacket boat tail bullet, so you can see the boat tail there. You can see the cantilor, and of course, being a full metal jacket, it's got a hard point. Some people call them hard ball. And you can see the slightly rebated boat tail there. So this is a bullet which should have a reasonably good ballistic coefficient because of its slender, streamlined shape and boat tail. Now Prvi, of course, calls this 174 grain ammunition, and I pulled apart 10 rounds and weighed the bullets from 10, and I come up with an average of 174.6 grains, and a Mark 8 303 British bullet weighs 175 grains nominally. So this is actually very much a duplicate of the Mark 8 bullet in that fashion. Now, as far as the weights of these bullets go, we had a standard deviation over the 10 that I weighed of 0.6 of a grain, but an extreme spread over the lightest from the 10 samples of 1.6 grains, which is a little bit high, but for a military ball duplicate would be probably within the specifications for original type military ammunition. Not quite as good as a match type bullet, but they don't actually claim this to be a match bullet, so a little bit of variance in the weight, but the ammunition, in my experience, shoots pretty well nonetheless. One of the critical things with any military duplication load is to see if the diameter of the bullet is suitable for most of the guns it's going to be fired in. And here we can see we get 0.311 thereabouts, 0.311 inches for the diameter of the projectile, and that's right within the ballpark of what you would expect for 303 British ammunition. Most commercial ammunition runs 311 to 312, so that's certainly well within the proper range. Now, of course, accuracy with 303 British rifles is heavily dependent upon the condition of the barrel that you're using. So A lot of 303 rifles have very tired barrels. You know, they haven't been manufactured in any quantity since the last World War. So most of the barrels have seen a lot of use. A lot of them have seen use with cordite ammunition, which is quite erosive. Also use with corrosive primers and some of the damaging effects that those may have had on a barrel. So quite often 303 rifles won't shoot good with pretty much any load you put in them. So it's kind of can be a challenge with some rifles to get good shooting ammunition. Basically, the testing that I've done in the next video is going to be with a target grade 303 rifle, which has a good barrel, and you will see some of the groups that is capable of. Anyway, we'll move on from looking at the projectile to having a look at the powder that's in these rounds. I got my pan for my scale here, and I did pull apart 10 rounds and weigh the powder from the 10 rounds, but I did have a little bit of a difficulty with some of the powder kind of leaking out of my impact bullet puller, so I'm not going to give you a whole lot of data on the powder, other than to say that I got an average of 42.8 grains over the 10 charges that I weighed, and I did have a little bit of spillage from the bullet puller when I was taking them apart, so my data is probably not 100%. Anyway, the powder in these appears to be an IMR style extruded powder, and IMR powders are generally pretty reliable types of powders, especially in cold conditions. They ignite fairly easily, and they generally give fairly uniform velocities because of that uniform ignition characteristics. Now we're going to put the powder back in the case here just to demonstrate something which is kind of interest. I can get my extra light source out here, my flashlight out. I just want to show you how far up in the case the powder goes. You can see right into the case there, hopefully, and you can see that the powder comes up almost to the base of the case neck. Well, a little bit lower than that, maybe the junction of the neck and the body. And so the cartridge case is quite full of powder, which is a good thing. It's a very high loading density, and if you were to shake one of these loaded rounds, you'll hear a little bit of powder moving around, but there's not much movement. So high loading densities generally contribute to the fairly good, accurate powder burning, and therefore accurate ammunition. So we're going to move on from looking at the powder to looking at the cartridge case itself. And of course, this is a rimmed cartridge case, as all 303 British are. And you can see that this has a boxer primer here. And I've taken a primer out of a fired round here, just so you can see there's the boxer primer hole right there. And these will reload with standard North American sized large rifle primers. And there is not a crimp, there's no crimp around the outside edge of the primer pocket, so there's no worry about removing a crimped in primer. You can simply reload with your standard reloading tools. No need to take out a crimped in primer if you are concerned about reloading. Now the cartridge case has a standard type of rim, almost like a military style rim. There's no undercut. You will see in some commercial cartridges, even with a rim, there'll be a little undercut in here. This just goes straight down and flush like a standard military loading would have. And we've got the very nicely annealed neck area of the cartridge case, which looks very nice. And I can tell you from some measurements I took before, these are a fairly heavy cartridge case. They weigh about 176 grains. Excuse me, that's fairly heavy. A Remington commercial case weighs about 161 grains. And I recently did a review on some old Herder's brass, which was a little bit heavier than this, but it's good to keep in mind that if you're using load data that was developed with a lighter case like a Remington, you may have to adjust it downward slightly to use this brass. Now the reason you have to adjust the load data downward somewhat, perhaps by about 5% when you use a heavier cartridge case like this, is because there's a reduced internal volume with the heavier case, and with reduced volume you will get higher pressures with if you use the data that was intended for a lighter weight case. Now there are some advantages to this heavier cartridge case, and it's a little bit thicker through the sidewalls here, and most 303 British firearms are Lee Enfields, and most of them have very generously cut chambers, and quite often there will be some expansion, well, there will almost always be some expansion in Lee Enfields right above the solid web here. And the thicker material here helps these cartridge cases withstand case head separations, which are a common problem with 303 British reloaded ammunition, especially if their cases were full-length resized at any point in time. Now this fired case here, you can see a little bit of a tiny little bit of expansion here right above the solid web. However, this is a target type chamber this was fired in, so it's quite a bit tighter than a standard commercial chamber. But that increased thickness will help with case life, and is also a little bit of a safety feature, just to to keep everything good and tight in your gun and not letting go at an inopportune moment. Alright, one final examination of the case before we end this video up here. Just want to draw your attention to the inside of the case neck. You will notice that there is no sealant on that. Some Prvi ammunition uses an asphalt seal to waterproof the ammunition, and they have not done that with this 303 British load. And also there does not appear to be any sealant around the primer either. Often you will see a lacquer type sealant on some of the Prvi loads. This one does not appear to have that waterproofing sealant around the junction of the primer and the primer pocket. And I guess the last thing I'm going to point out is the crimping of the case into that cantilever. We showed you the cantilever on the bullet earlier there, and on a loaded round you can see how well the cartridge case is crimped into that cantilever. So good and secure, should stay put under recoil or during the feeding cycle from the magazine into the chamber of the rifle. Anyway, that's going to do it for part 1 of this review of the 303 174 grain Prvi ammunition. The next video I will put out related to this ammunition will be the range testing portion, and in that video we will do some accuracy testing and some velocity testing as well. So hopefully the weather clears up enough that I'm able to get out and put some of this ammunition to the test. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later.